Hi, everyone. This is the Introduction to Sociology, Chapter 1 summary. Chapter 1 is titled The Nature and Uses of Sociology. And in this video, we're going to cover 4 learning objectives for this chapter. The first is that we're going to define sociology. What is sociology? And the second is we're going to describe something called the sociological imagination. What is the sociological imagination? What is that? We're going to talk about that. And third, we're going to use sociological perspectives to look at the reality that's behind popular wisdom. And fourth, we're going to compare and contrast sociology with other types of sciences. Okay, so let's jump into the first one. What is sociology? Now, the term sociology is defined as the scientific study of human behavior, of social groups, and society. The term sociology was coined in the 19th century by a man named Auguste Comte, and Comte was the first person to use the term sociology. In fact, he actually considered that sociology would be what he called the queen of the sciences, that sociology would sit at the top of all the sciences because it was the most important science, because it was the science that studied human behavior, human beings, and the societies and cultures that we lived in. Now, if we want to look at this in a very broad perspective, human beings have been thinking about, questioning, and asking about society since the dawn of time. For as long as human beings have existed, we've lived in social groups, and we've asked questions about social groups and about our society. However, if you look in the past, in the ancient world, it was more common that questions about society would not be answered by science, but rather by folk wisdom, common sense, the wisdom of the folk, the group. You might also use philosophy, the ancient Greeks sitting around and asking questions about why is something like this. During the medieval feudalist time, under medieval feudalism, we would look at society through the lens of religion. The Catholic Church held a monopoly on truth. And so questions about why society is set up like this, why is one person a peasant, but the other person is a aristocrat? That was because of religion, because of God. That's how it was ordained. So it wasn't until modern times, the rise of capitalism, industrial revolution, the birth of modernity, where we have replaced philosophy and religion and common sense folkways with scientific methods, with using research and empirical evidence and data and testing hypotheses and studies. That is the difference between sociology and ancient forms of questioning about society, is that sociology strives to be not just asking about society, but studying society scientifically. So to answer the first question of the learning module, the first goal is that the first objective is that sociology is defined as a scientific study of society itself. Now, the second question is the relationship between sociology and this thing we call the sociological imagination. The sociological imagination is a term that was coined by a sociologist in the 1960s named C. Wright Mills. And Mills was a very popular and influential sociologist who really influenced everybody since his day in the 1960s. He used this term sociological imagination to describe the quality of mind that a sociologist should have when they're looking at the world. And he really said that in order to understand any individual person, you have to look at 2 things. First, you have to look at their place in history. And secondly, you have to look at their individual biography. So in order to understand a person, whether that person be living in ancient Rome 2,000 years ago, or living in feudal Japan 500 years ago, or living in modern America in 2023, in order to understand them, you have to look at the history of where they are in this point in time and in this society and this culture. How did that historically develop? And also, how did their individual life, their biography of the events that happened in their life, how did that play out? So the sociological imagination allows you to understand individual people by looking at their history of the culture and society that they live in and the individual biography of their own life. And this is something that we use to describe what the textbook calls the sociological perspective. And this sociological perspective is a way of questioning the obvious and familiar experiences to look at what is deeper. So that's really what the sociological imagination does. Now, we can divide two different levels of analysis for sociology. There's the macro level and the micro level, right? So macro level is at the top. Macro, it means that it's something that's broad, large scale. We're looking at questions not just of individual people, we're looking at entire societies at a national level or an even international level. The global economic system, relations between nation states, cultures and economies around the world. That's a macro level question. Now, micro sociology is when you're looking at everyday groups and people. How does this group interact with each other? If you want to go to a comic book convention and study the interactions and everyday lives of the people that go to, dress up as superheroes and go see comic book stuff. If you want to go study a religious group, go attend services at a local mosque and study what the people, the culture, the rituals, the activities, the behaviors, the ways that they think and the ways they interact with each other. That's a micro level. So again, you can look at a macro question. Macro sociology is the top, big picture, large questions on a large scale. Micro sociology is small scale, local individuals, how they interact with each other in face-to-face everyday situations. So that's the two levels of analysis we can use in sociology. Now, let's move on to our next learning objective, which is the difference between sociology and popular wisdom. Now, popular wisdom is what you could call common sense, right? It's just the everyday views and biases and folk ways and folklore of common sense of the society you live in. Something that just, everybody knows that, And for our purposes as scientists, we will start with common sense. We will start with popular wisdom, but we want to go deeper than that. We want to go beneath common sense, beneath popular wisdom, and go into the underlying reality that's behind that. Because oftentimes when we see something that's common sense, we just look at it on the surface level, right? But science would not matter. We wouldn't need science if we just looked at something on the surface and that was automatically true. We would never have been able to understand gravity if we just looked at the surface. We would not be able to understand, subatomic particles. You can't just look on the surface and understand how things work. We have to go deeper. And that's what sociologists do when it comes to society itself. Now, we start with the popular wisdom, but we want to go behind the popular wisdom. We're going to go deeper. We want to go underneath it. We want to get beneath popular common sense everyday wisdom and get to a deeper scientific analysis. And one of the most famous examples in all of sociology of this is when Karl Marx studied the commodity. Now, what is a commodity? A commodity can be any item that is sold in exchange on the marketplace, any product that you can buy or sell, right? A car, a TV, right? Video game system, right? Any object that we sell. Marx said that if you look at our society under capitalism, it just looks like all we're doing is just selling all these commodities. And on the surface, these commodities have value and power over us in and of themselves. A car is this amazing thing. Where did that come from? How did that get created? It just seems like the car has all this power, right? But what Marx said is that as sociologists, we have to go underneath the surface level. The commodity is not something that just magically appeared out of thin air. A car is something that had to be produced. It had to be created. And how was it produced? How was it created? Through labor, through work. People had to actually go to work to build the car, to take the raw materials from the earth, extract those raw materials that go into producing the steel and the plastics that make the car, and then build the car, assemble the parts, create them into parts, put them together, ship them across the country, sell them to you, right? So a car, any commodity, is not something that just has magical power that just exists on its own that we just buy and sell. A commodity has a deeper reality behind that common sense, behind that popular wisdom, and that is that commodities are created. They are produced by workers. Workers and laborers create those commodities. So that's one of the ideas, what we would look at in sociology. We would look at something that's popular, common sense, everyday wisdom, and we go a deeper level. We go beyond the common wisdom to something behind that, to just try to see the scientific truth behind the common wisdom. All right, so then the final learning objective for chapter 1 is comparing the relationship between sociology and other sciences. Okay, so we would typically break down 2 main categories between what we call, on the one hand, social science, and on the other hand, the natural sciences, right? And this division is based on the natural science being things that study non-human aspects of society, for example, biology, which studies living organisms, or physical sciences like physics, chemistry, astronomy, that study the non-living physical world that we live in. On the other hand, there's a branch of the sciences called social science. Now, social sciences also study the natural world because human beings and society, we're a part of nature. We're a part of the material reality of the world. But what we study in social sciences is specifically we take the scientific method and we use that to research human behavior. And the social sciences are broken down into different subcategories, right? So sociology is the main one we're talking about in this course, which is the study of human society. But we also can break social sciences into different subgroups. We can look at psychology, which focuses on the individual human mind. We could look at political science, which focuses on government and political systems. We could look at economics, which focuses on the market economy, on the capitalist economy, right? So linguistics is a study of language, human language. So when we really talk about science, we have to break them down into different categories. Now, they're all connected in many ways, and that's why at the beginning of this lecture, I said Auguste Comte, the first sociologist, the man who coined the term, he said it was the queen of the sciences. Sociology is the queen of the sciences. Now, he saw that all these sciences are related, but he thought sociology would be at the top because that's the one that studies human beings, human society. Now, a final distinction about science is that there are 2 other types of how we use science. One way of using science is through pure science, pure research. And what that means is that our goal as scientists in this case is to study something. We're studying whether it's physics, whether we're looking at atoms or particles, or whether we're political scientists looking at a government policy. We are just purely studying a topic out of pure curiosity, just to find what the research shows. On the other hand, there is something we call an applied science. Applied science is when we take the knowledge that comes from the pure sciences and we use that knowledge for a specific purpose, to solve a specific problem. Whether we take some scientific knowledge and use it to create a new technology that might, let's say a medical technology that might solve some sort of human physical need, or we might use social science, sociology, and apply that to help people. In that case, it would be something like social work. You would work in a nonprofit or a government agency in order to help people who are homeless, help people who are experiencing poverty, something like that. So again, that's a distinction between pure science, which is just focused on the research, and applied science, which takes the research but tries to apply it, try to use it to serve some kind of purpose. Okay, so that covers the first chapter of our textbook. Again, we looked at 4 learning outcomes, 4 learning objectives. We defined sociology, we defined the sociological imagination, we discussed the difference between science and popular common sense wisdom, and finally, we compared and contrasted sociology with the other sciences.